What's up, beautiful souls? Welcome to this edition of the Deeper Truth Healing Hour with me, Reverend LC. Tonight, we welcome back just a blessing of a human being in my life, and I know that he is going to continue to be a blessing in this space, Mr. Jason Shiers. Today, we're going to go back all the way back to the beginning. Often in the addiction recovery and mental health spaces, we often find ourselves asking why. Why am I here? Why did I get here? Or why is this my life? But are we asking for the right whys? Are we asking in an attempt to control, or are we asking in an attempt to gain some understanding about how we find ourselves in these states? Well, these are just a few of the topics that we are going to discuss today. And to do this, we're going to take it all the way back to the very beginning. I am super eager to have this conversation with Jason today, and I know that you are going to gain a lot from it. So, you know what? We're going to get right into it. If you guys are ready to get into this Deeper Truth Healing Hour with me, Reverend LC, and our great guest tonight, Jason Shiers, we're ready to. So let's go. Jason, welcome back, man. Thanks so much for coming back. It's good to see you again.
I love your production. I feel like I'm on TV or something,
It's one of my favorite parts, man. I love getting to meet somebody and make something special,
Yeah.
just for them. And like you're a guy that has such a reserved nature. It seems like when I meet you, like full of knowledge, a reserved nature. You seem like the kind of guy who does not flaunt his knowledge or anything around, but you are very approachable, very there when it's necessary and needed, and so willing to give. And it was great creating just a space like that for you. So what's been going on in your world, bro?
Yeah. My girlfriend lost her father to cancer,
Oh
and
my
and
gosh.
I've been kind of supporting her through that process, but it's been bringing up a lot of grief, because we talked about last time that I lost my dad, when I was a small child, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of been a lot of feelings, and and a challenging time to sort of to go through that with her, and really sort of sometimes I am lost for words, like you said. It's kind of like I'm quietly present, and I do know a lot. It's like, but sometimes I can get passionate about subjects, and when, particularly stuff that we're talking about. I love having these conversations, but
Yeah.
I find like the older and wiser I've got, the less I talk.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense, man. It really does, because there doesn't seem to be this need to say, look how smart I am, and look how much knowledge I have. It's just this great, this white, like, just like you said, it's this quiet presence of, it is more often valuable to just sit in a space and observe and listen. I find in my younger days, I didn't listen as much as I talked, and now I'm more interested in the listening. And so, I guess that leads us in. I mean, even the stuff that you're going through right now, and your girlfriend's going through, kind of leads us into the conversation that we were having today about our origins, and how so much of this stuff, begins far before, when we're talking about addiction and recovery. I've always said, the addiction, the substance, the habit, the whatever it is, the obsession is just a very small byproduct of those much deeper conditions.
Yeah.
And lately I've been listening to Gabor Mate. I don't even know how you say his name, but Gabor Mate's new book about the myth of normal. And there's a lot about origins in there and how far it goes back, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Man,
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, you can go further back than being born. Like you can go into generational stuff, which I guess is what you're talking about. You know, like how innocently generational beliefs have been passed through. You know, like years of development and so on, and from family member to family member. You know, like in just completely oblivious. You know, it's
mhm,
like and um, you know, there certainly is. You know, I can see it even in my own children. You know, it's like I can see my own children. I can see my own trauma in myself, like from the loss of my dad when I was a kid, and how it kind of shows up for me now. And I can see it in my own children too, how that stuff shows up for them, what's in me. You know, so I can
mhm.
visually kind of see their responses to some stuff. You know, and while yeah, they don't openly communicate that to me, I kind of sense it. You know.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Like I could see that it's amazing to parent children from that space of where you are able to see things, because I see it in my own son. You know, a lot of the trauma of you know, things that I experienced, and then not to mention how parenting my son brought put a mirror up to my own trauma surrounding being transgendered, and to the point that I could just no longer not face it anymore, because I was somehow innocently thinking that I could almost live my life through him. And I'll always say that, you know, my one of my my only real regret when it comes to him is that I didn't get to know him as a soul, as a divine soul, because there was so much imprinting that I did, you know, from my space onto him. So it's interesting to have children and to watch them from this space.
Yeah, and that's really where we were going to start talking about, like
Yeah,
how, you know, like how, where does it all start, you know,
yeah,
and that's where it starts, you know, like in that you can see even here from two people that clearly have an understanding of the human condition, you know, it's like how me too, I'm going to include me, you know, and what you just said is like sometimes we project things onto our children, even knowing what we know, you know, that there's no
hmm,
such thing as a perfect parent or perfect conditions or perfect circumstances or you know meeting all relational needs. You know, you're going to fuck your kids up basically.
yeah,
You know, it's kind of like there's no way around it. It's going to
yeah,
happen, you know,
yeah,
and it'll be their worst pain and it'll be their biggest gift too. You know, it's kind
yes,
of like that's just how it works, the human
yeah.
experience, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing that you said that. I said that just a few weeks ago to a young mother who was absolutely within her own traumatic happening with her family, and it's like she's reliving these little girl moments, this trauma, and she's completely oblivious to the fact that that is now, you know, bleeding out onto her children. And I say to her, you're gonna fuck your children up. There's just no way around it. There's you can't not. But then at the same time, you know, it can be what their path becomes, you know, then their path to generational healing. Because from what I understand, and who knows if this is true, but trauma goes, it takes 7 generations then to clear that generational trauma, and that's if you seem to be trying. I think that's why we're still dealing with so much racism and so much of the hate for the LGBTQ plus communities and different things, that we're still living this, you
Mm.
know, from generations past, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like you said, it's like there has to be willing participants in the healing process for
Yeah.
to make an imprint on that, you know. And it's like right now we're kind of just touching the sides of it, you know. It's
Yeah.
like so I imagine it will carry on, you know. And people are so embedded in their beliefs about right and wrong, black and white, you know. It's kind of like and so on that. You know, and many people. There's a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello, and he quite clearly says in the first chapter, he says some people they live their life asleep, they breed children in their sleep, you know, and they die in
Mm,
their sleep. You know, it's like, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. That many
yeah.
people live a life physically awake, but mentally
Mm-hmm.
asleep to the truth of the human condition and the spiritual truth of who we are. And they just enforce their beliefs on everyone and everything that they're around, and then that's it. They never
Yeah.
wake up to a deeper truth than that. So in that case, no impact on the generational trauma is made. In fact,
Yeah.
it's just perpetuated further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And while I hear right now, the big thing in the recovery space is a lot of people are coming to find themselves in this big spiritual awakening. And it's real hard to use real generalized terms because I believe there's so much that's being overused right now, and
Mm,
yet we're still only scratching the surface. When we talk about a lot of what I find is that a lot of people believe that once they start learning about universal law, that this now becomes their great spiritual awakening, and only if it stopped at that, only if it just went to law of attraction and you get what you think about, if that was just it. But that's not even remotely what we're talking about when we talk about a real, awakening, because it's so much to say spiritual awakening doesn't even hold, to me it doesn't even fill the space of
mm,
what that awakening actually is. It's more of that awareness. It's about becoming aware of just how much you truly are, like who your deeper truths, like what that is, far past, something like addict or alcoholic or transgender or black man or white woman or whatever it is. There's so much deeper than that. And what worries me in the climate that we're in, especially for people that are in, the addiction recovery mental health space, is that it's very easy to get stuck right there on the surface. And while there is some truth about us creating reality, and our thoughts play a big part in our experience, it would be it would be heartbreaking if that's as far maybe as you went, because there's just so much more to all of this. And I think that for us today to be having a conversation about this, I think is a great time in the climate of where we are to really be talking about this, the origins, the understanding of who we are as a divine being, sovereign being. Um, so where exactly would you think a real great place for us to start in the asking of the whys are? What do you find? What did you find in your own experience when you started asking why? And what are you finding these days?
yeah, I think it's good to make that distinction to start with, like, because what you were just saying, in like that discovery of the infinite, it's kind
Mm,
of like that there's no answers. There are literally no answers, and every time you think you found the answer, that's
yeah,
not it. I can guarantee you that.
yeah.
And like, just to stay in the question, like the who am
Mm,
I question, is kind of
mm,
like the starting point is that um the brain, the intellect has been often for many of us that have been through addiction, it's kind of like we've learned self-sufficiency, like, and we've learned to be okay in adversity. We've been
mm,
through violence and
yeah,
crime and chaos and craziness, and
yeah,
survived in prisons and on the streets and in crack houses and all sorts of
yep,
shit, that we've done.
yep.
So we learn, like, to be very astute and street smart, how to survive difficulty, and we're always on guard. The
Always,
brain
yep.
is always ready, and it's kind of like, so we're watching, and it's like, and the brain is like what I call the sum accumulation of all knowledge, that's
Mm,
gathered over time. It's kind of,
yeah.
but the mind is the starting point. The mind being, as Sid Banks described it, he differentiated between the brain and the mind. That the mind is, if the brain is like the hard drive, if you refer to a computer, like it just contains data that's inputted. The motherboard,
Mm,
is our spiritual connection to all that we are. It's like
mm,
to the unexplainable intelligence behind life that makes the rain fall or the grass grow. It's kind of, or any of those things that you can't really answer as to why they happen.
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to know why, because I thought my brain thought if it knew why, it could stop. You know, it's kind
Yeah.
of if I just knew why I did this, then I'd be able
Yeah.
to stop. And it's like it's almost like I have that question from so many people that come with struggles with addictions. Like, well, so why did this happen? Why do I do this? How come I can't stop? You know, or why do I just keep meeting the same person and keep ending up in a destructive relationship? Or why do I keep gambling or keep
Yeah.
overeating even when I don't want to? You know, it's like
Mm.
that's the why. And that's coming from the brain, the intellect. You know, it's like
Mm.
we want to know why because we think if we know why, then we can stop. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, but actually the brain is like you know, it's like it's the worst tool in the toolbox to kind of resolve your emotional distress. You know, it's just the habitual way of dealing with stuff that we've learned, you know, how to get through life.
Mm.
um so like taking that a step further, you know, like how does it become that way? You know, it's like we become disconnected from all that we are. You know, it's like
Yes.
on birth we are immediately, what's the first thing that happens, right? We're given a name and an
Yep.
identity, you know, a gender, right? It's kind of
Yep.
like, and at
Yep.
that point we become separate. You know,
Yep.
it's kind of like
Yeah.
there's me and you, right and wrong, good and bad. You know, it's kind of like me being a separate to you in the world. So from the oneness of everything, the wonder that happens in the lady's womb where a baby is conceived and then grows, you know, and then is delivered into the world, you know, it's kind of like, and then separation starts, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and all the time growing is separation. You know, it's kind
Mm.
of like we meet people and we develop an identity. You know, it's like people call you by your name. It's kind of like the oneness is continually moving away, you know,
Yeah.
away from everything. And at some point in that process, you know, for some of us, adversity happens, trauma happens, you know, challenging that we're not ready for, you know, and the body is impressioned upon, you know, the nervous
Mhm.
system responds to adversity,
Yep.
freezes, you know, it's
Yep.
kind of like something happens for me, the loss of a parent, you know, when I was young. For other people, abuse, violence, drug addiction, all sorts of chaos and stuff, you know, it's like instability, insecurity, moving around, you know, and in that approach, you know, we find coping mechanisms. You know, as children we are infinitely creative, but it makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
we're part of the infinite intelligence behind life, right? It's kind of like,
Mhm.
how many people have you met that have been through adversity that now are thriving, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
endless. You know, I've been meeting people like that my whole life, and I'm sure I
Mhm.
will continue to meet people like that. So it just shows that we can thrive through adversity, right? That there's
Yeah. Yeah.
infinite intelligence that's built into the human system. You know,
Yep.
it's there. So all the time this separation is growing. You know, it's kind of like what's happening is we're just finding ways to innocently cope with our experience as a separate human. You
Mm.
know, and that's where the development of addiction comes to start with. You know, it's an innocent way of coping with experience. You know, the
Yep.
mind body is a self-correcting system. It works perfectly. Food digests by itself. I mean, you
Yep.
don't beat your own heart. You don't breathe yourself. You know, you can consciously breathe, but when you're not thinking about it, your body is still breathing.
Yep.
You know, it's like your digestive system works by itself. You know, your finger heals if you cut it, your leg mends if you break it. You know, everything about the mind body system is self-correcting, you know, and it's kind of like, so in that, you know, addiction is a simple and innocent attempt to cope with what feels like adversity internally, you know, a
Yes.
disturbing internal a belief about me separate to you needs
Mm.
something to be okay on the inside, you know.
Yes.
That's
Mm.
that's where we're starting off. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
like that. There's been the mind, like rather than saying addiction is a unexplainable phenomena or a disease or an affliction or something that's wrong with you. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's just an innocent, learned way of coping to quieten my own mind. You know, if you think
Yeah.
about it in an from an adult perspective in the process of active addiction, you know, it's kind of like you're trying to stop. It's kind of like you get a thought, I think I'll go and use, you know, it's kind of like it becomes an obsessive thought, an obsession of the mind and a compulsion of the body, right? And it's kind of
Mhm.
like then I want to go and use. So what happens is I make a decision. Okay, I make the phone call. You know, have you got anything? It's
Yeah.
kind of like, I already feel better.
Yeah.
I haven't
Yeah.
even used.
Yeah.
I haven't took anything. There's no substance in my body, but the mind goes quiet and the
Yeah.
body stops craving. You know, it's kind of like so. So that attempt to go and do something is to quieten the mind. That's it. I already feel better. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's not about the substance. Never
Yeah.
was. Right?
Yeah.
Every person I ever ask, answer me this question: at what point did you feel better when you made the decision to use? You know, it's kind of like, or when you used. And every single person will say, when I made the decision
Yeah.
and I knew I could get something.
Yeah. 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 Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And I remember coming to, there was the constant, like I was on a marathon running away from myself. And the using came in exactly that space, and the further I got away from myself, the more I needed to use. And I remember getting to that place where, I stepped into recovery, which is healing to me, just healing. There wasn't this thing that I had to turn around and fight. I just had to stop running and turn around and start coming back home to myself. And I always say that recovery is a trip home to myself, because for me, that's what I had to. And it was always this thing in the mind where it's like, oh gosh, if I stop, I'm going to have to fight these triggers, and I'm going to have to fight this, and it's going to be this big battle and this war. When in reality, it became more of a listening experience, a feeling experience, a way to learn how to be with myself and look at myself again. And, you know, the way that you are describing it to me is brilliant, is as if, because that's what we're trying to do here, is take away that idea that people have, that belief system that something is inherently wrong with you because this is your chosen mode of coping. We fail to even see that it is an innocent coping mechanism versus this moral failing of, I'm just choosing to be this down and out, completely gone junkie. And that's how society will look upon it. And then that imprints upon us. We feel that shame. We feel the same things. We have those belief systems, and it almost becomes harder sometimes than it has to be. It really does, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's some more to mention. You know, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like so. You know, in that growing up, you know, as children, we're like sponges. You know,
Yes.
we absorb what we see. You know, it's kind
Mm.
of like, and the reflection that we get. You know, we need a loving, nurturing, consistently. You know, as children, reflection from others. And as we said earlier, you know, you're going to fuck your kids up. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
like even I am not present to my kids full time. You know, it's kind of
Right.
like I'm very conscious of it, and I do my best. It's kind of like, but if you grew up with parents that were not conscious of you, they were not nurturing, you know, they were not giving, loving, and perhaps even worse than that, you know, they were struggling with drugs and alcohol themselves, or
Mm-hmm.
mental health, or they were working full time, you know, whatever it is, you know, it's kind of, you didn't get the reflection back, you know, so
Yeah.
you then start create beliefs about yourself. I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, you know, it's kind of like, and this is where the
So true.
separation grows. And then on top of that, you've got societal, cultural, religious conditioning, you know, which are beliefs of someone else that are installed via
Yeah.
reflection into you, you know. So you
Mm.
start, let's say, take a common one, let's say racism. You know, you grew up in a particularly racist family, and your parents were racist. They were always commenting of people with a different color or a different origin family, you know, and then you become racist by default. Not
Yeah.
necessarily, not guaranteed. You actually become either completely anti-racist or you
Right.
join in with it. You know, it's kind of
Right.
one
Right.
way or the other. But like then you just grow up with that belief about that people of a different color or from a different family of origin are bad, wrong, stealing our money, our jobs, or whatever was
Yep.
installed into you at that time. I'm just using this as one example.
Yeah.
It can happen across
Oh
anything.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
then you're living it out. You actually seeing people of color or of a different family of origin, and you're angry towards them or aggressive or off with them. But that's not your belief. That was just
Yeah.
installed into you via It could be culture, could be religion, could be family, could be peer pressure, friends, the school you went to, or any adversity that you went through. You know, it's kind of like, so it's almost like I describe it like if you're wearing like yellow glasses, everything looks yellow. You know, it's kind
Hmm.
of like it's just like that. You know,
Yeah.
beliefs are thoughts that you have took on and believed to be of your own, you know, over time. It's kind of like consistently being thought. And, you know, they are in service of developing an identity to get somewhere in the world based on
Hmm.
fear. You know, it's kind of like, because when
Yes.
we identify as separate, it looks like life is on me, you know, like to get
Hmm.
somewhere, like more money, more property, more prestige, more
Yeah.
status, better body shape, better relationship, all those things that we crave for, like as a separate thing. That those are what I need to be seen as acceptable or okay or good or whatever in the world, right? And
Yeah.
my beliefs, I will trash everything else that's within my beliefs, you know, to get to those things to make me better. Why? Because I feel like happiness is over there, you know, it's
Yes.
kind of like, and me as a separate person in this world need to get there. Well, all that is the innocent creation of the human experience created in the mind, you know, it's kind of like that life and happiness happens outside of me. And so
Hmm.
there's so much wrapped up in that, you know, it's kind of like,
Hmm.
but so addiction is like medicating my feeling that I need to be there and I'm here, you know, or I need to
Yeah.
be that and I'm this, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you know, based on the condition that you received.
Yep.
And then,
Yep.
you know, that separate person, that person that doesn't realize that we're all beyond our identity, our name, our age, our sex, our religion, all those things that are man-made. You know, it's kind
Yeah.
of, there's a spiritual energy, you know, that we're born into in perfection. I mean, everyone says this, right? Oh, I love being around kids. Everyone's, I love being around kids when they're so much fun. They're so playful.
Hmm.
Why? Because they're not
Yeah.
conditioned yet. They're not
Right.
conditioned with all the shit. They haven't had their
Right.
mind twisted, and they haven't had, you know, they're so free. They roll around in the dirt or they lay in the sand naked. You know, it's kind
Yeah.
of like they don't give a shit about getting covered in sand or getting dirt on their trainers or their clothes or messing their hair up. They're just
Yeah.
free, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like
Yeah.
that's what we love about being around children because they haven't yet been indoctrinated into the human experience that they're gonna have and you know taken on that heavy persona of kind of
So
like
true.
me versus the world, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, so true, and they're completely involved in their internal and their infinite happiness. You know, their whole imagination is what is creating their filter of life. So, you
Yeah,
know, they're seeing an astronaut in a space shuttle, you know, in the backyard in a wagon, and
yeah,
that's what, you know, becomes so fun about it. And you know, there you're right, there's just so much conditioning that comes around. How I remember being a child, and the moment that I realized that, you know, adults always seemed mad. I remember having that aware thought, and I asked I think, I don't remember if it was my mother or my grandfather, but I asked one of them, why are adults always mad? And, you know, I don't necessarily remember the answer, but I very much have the awareness of asking the question and remember seeing that. And I think at some point the answer was given to me, well, it's one day, you know, things won't seem as magical. And those belief systems start to become those filters, you're right, in which we have and experience our life. And if you're coming from that place of trauma and you know that disconnection very early, you know, then this is the filter now in which you see everything, and that becomes the experience. When you're talking about that, of course, everything goes back to gender for me. The biggest example in my life is gender. So I'm born in the South, and you know, according to my birth certificate and the doctors, I was born female. So therein starts that checking of the boxes, and therein starts this external identity that I'm supposed to live up to, and yet inherently I feel it different. You know, I know that I don't fit, and it wasn't as dramatic or important when I was young because nobody really cared. It was when I started getting older and people outside of me started also saying, no, wait a minute, you can't do that anymore because that doesn't go with this identity of being female. So then
Mm.
that creates in me this place of shame, or, well, I'm different, not that same freedom that you experience as a child of this is just me. So I like to play football, or I like to play this. And then that just seems to grow. It almost ends up growing. It almost grows like this little infection throughout our life, and to the point where, and to mirror what you were saying about the whole mirroring. And my father was an alcoholic. He wasn't the kind of alcoholic that lost everything, but he was that daily, everything's okay type of alcoholic. We party on the weekends. It looks, from my child's perspective, it looks like they're having fun. So then therein becomes this, oh, well, that's the way, I can be more like my dad. I can make a connection with him, and I can escape. And I remember the first time that alcohol hit when I was 11, and I was like, oh, this is a great way to escape all of these weird feelings that I have inside, all of these ways I don't fit. And it seems so easy for us to move away from that that sense of self, and move directly into those external, the external chasing of approval, or to fit in, or to calm the mind of asking those different questions of why, the why me's, the why was I abused, why was I born this way. And those questions, I don't know, can be answered, not by us anyway. It becomes an endless pursuit of the next thing. Mm.
Yeah. So life is almost like a circular journey, it's kind of like born as you are, it's kind of like from the very moment you're born, and it's kind of like, and the conditioning starts, it's kind of like, but then the journey is coming back to yourself, being
Yeah,
your true self, who you are. It's kind of, that's where the peace and the freedom is. It's kind of like when you embrace who you really feel you are, to a point where you feel comfortable being you, like,
yeah,
and it's not fitting into any stereotypical approach. I mean, it's where I love to do men's work, because I don't offer any belief about masculinity. It's kind of like, what I do is I undo that shit and allow people to be who they are. It's kind of like,
yeah,
because a lot of men are, just as an example, there's a lot of people out there doing men's work. I'll teach you how to be more masculine.
yeah, yeah,
My belief about
yeah,
masculinity. Kind of like, we'll be more alpha, we'll do weights, we'll go to the gym, we'll show our biceps,
yeah.
whatever. It's kind of like, I help people see beyond that, to see
That's
that, like,
amazing.
if you're more feminine than masculine, that's just how it is for you. It's
Yeah,
okay. And it's like, and to find happiness, peace, and contentment within that, without having to be something other than who you are. It's like,
yeah,
that's such a beautiful experience, like, to realize that you don't have to be anyone other than who you. In fact, the only place you're going to find happiness is in resting in who you really are.
mm. Yes, what a great word, resting. Mm.
Yeah, naturally resting in who you are. It's like, you can see that you're born perfect, and you're taken unknowingly on this journey away from yourself. It's like you're indoctrinated into a belief system, everyone else's, not your own. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
and it's why I encourage my kids just to be happy in whatever they do. I struggle with it sometimes,
Yeah,
school
I bet.
and food, eating habits, and all sorts of screen time and things. But like, I really just think, okay, they're gonna. I want them more than anything to know who they are. It's
Mm,
kind of like, because
mm.
that's what I think that all society is missing, because we're
Yes.
pushing people away. We're not actually helping people see who they are. We're just kind of forcing them into this
Yeah.
society of robots, and kind of like, to be something like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, fuck me. Like, let's teach kids who they are, not what do they want to do,
Yes.
like, in 20 years when they grow up at 5 years old
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
So you're taken on this journey. It's kind of, you go into the society that's been created. And Osho is one of my favorite spiritual teachers. He talks about religion is a byproduct of Christianity, of the
Yeah.
church. You know, he
Yeah.
said that, and society is also a byproduct of the church. And what happened, like originally with the church, is that they tried to dumb man down because they wanted
Yes.
followers. You know, it's kind
Yes.
of like, and now it's just turned into a. Even if you're not religious, you don't go to church, but you're almost in a way forced into to follow something. You know, that stops you stepping into your power and being who
Yes.
you really are. So we're taken through this cycle as a human being, but at some point, many people who come to me are of an age of 30, 40, 50, where they've had a few relationships, they've had a lot of struggles, and they've got to this point where they want to ask this question, who am I?
Mm.
Who am I? It's kind of like, and what is all this shit that I'm doing, to try and be happy and never, I've many entrepreneurs I've worked with. It's kind of like, oh, I've got millions in the bank, I've got holiday homes and houses and cars and that shit, and I feel like killing myself.
Yeah.
It's like, because happiness can't come from outside things, like what we're taught. Happiness
Yep.
can only come from standing up in our power, who we really are, and saying what we really see, and being with people, seeing beyond the identities that have been created by society, and just seeing the
Yes.
beautiful spiritual energy that flows through all people, regardless of what it looks like on the outside.
So true. And I think if we spent more time encouraging that, we would not have so many labels to talk about and all of the hatred that comes along with some. And I often wonder, because we know that gender and sexuality are different subjects, but I wonder how many you know young effeminate men end up embracing the identity of being homosexual because they're
Mm.
it's almost not allowed to be an effeminate male. And I wonder how many people become. I'll use this example. So as I refuse to accept, well, I didn't know what the word transgender meant. I didn't know that other people had this condition. I also didn't know at the time that I was born with a set of my hormones were I was called intersexed. I didn't know that. But at the time, so I found this tribe of people that were in the gay community. And that was enough that I could feel somewhat comfortable in my skin, and there were other people. There was an accepting community there.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, you know, and I use this as an example because I have enough experience in it, but I just wonder if we spent more time allowing people to be the unique them that they were created to be, minus all of the things you got to fit into. If we would just have spend so much less time trying for us personally to find our own tribes. And also, I just wonder how much we would even be talking about that now if there was this climate of, well, who are we, who are we at an infinitely divine level versus all of our boxes, and do our boxes line up? Because you're right, there are many people. I mean, and we can point out celebrities that have lost their lives to suicide when looking outwardly they had it all.
Yeah.
That in and of itself should be a great indicator that happiness does not live in a bank account, and it doesn't live in a profession, and it doesn't live in a sexual identity. That there's so much more to that. I think that we spend so much time closing that stuff off that people have no choice but to cope. I mean,
It makes sense, right? I mean,
yeah.
addiction makes perfect sense when you think about it from this perspective. Like, we're so
Yeah.
lost, it's kind of like in our belief systems as human beings, and we're so at war. I mean, we're talking about all wars, all country borders, all stuff here. It's kind of like that's created from this belief in separation, that using something to cope with that, the challenge of being different to what's
Yeah.
supposed to be. You know, it's kind of like is makes perfect sense, right? Of course, if our mind body is a self-correcting system, then craving a escape from what I believe my life to be, you know, it's kind
Yeah.
of like, well, I mean, it just sounds exactly as it sounds like it would work like that, and it, you know, exactly as it was meant to, because, like you said, you know, using that example, you know, of men that feel more primarily female, you know, it's kind of like in their nature, you know, or however it feels to them, try to fit into a society where we're taught how to be more manly or something. And just like using that example, it's like they're gonna feel kind of like, what's wrong with me? You know,
Yep.
it's kind of like, because they don't understand beliefs and how that's all created and the divine design of human beings. You know, it's
Mhm.
like in the eyes, like we're all born in the eyes of perfection, right?
Yeah.
There's no, you know, we need food and love and shelter, you know, when we're born, and then the rest goes on from there, you know.
Yeah.
So you know, looking at it from from those perspectives, addiction, you know, I sometimes refer to it as the lost man's way to enlightenment. You
Mm,
know, it's like,
it's great.
you know, it will drive you that way. Pain and
Yep.
suffering will. Most people that ask that question, "Who am I?" have gone through a lot of pain and suffering. You know, it's
Yeah.
like they've gone through a lot of questioning, like, how come my life's like this? How, you know, they've been on self-destruct, they've perhaps been suicidal, close to suicide, or even attempted suicide
Yeah.
one or many times, you know, and it's never happened, and they're still there kind of like wondering, you know, and it's
Yeah.
sad that it has to take so much suffering for people to start wondering or questioning, you know, like, what is this human experience that we're in here? You know, like
Yeah.
seeing that there's no rules, there's no right and wrong, there's no good and bad. You know, it's all impressioned upon us. You know, when we're born, and then starting to step into this space where, when we ask those questions, you know, our mind opens up. I like the question or the statement. You know, we don't know what we don't know, and it's like,
Mm,
you could just stop and think about that for a second. Like, we don't know what we don't know. You know, I mean, what that basically means is there is infinite amount of stuff that we don't know. In,
yeah.
you know, like, how fucking huge is that? I don't mean
Yeah.
it like a throwaway. Yeah, go. I'm sure there's a few things I don't know, but you know, I know
Yeah.
quite. I don't mean it like that. You know, I
Yeah.
mean
I
it
yeah, I get it.
like fuck.
Really.
You know, like,
Yeah.
this is like, wow. You know, like, newsflash. You know, it's kind of,
Yeah.
you don't know what we don't know. That means there's a lifetime of exploration, of curiosity about the human condition, about who we are, about the joy and contentment and happiness that's available for all people, regardless of
Yeah.
how much they've suffered, struggled, or how much crazy shit they've done in addiction. You know, it's like that
Yeah.
any person can wake up to the truth of who they
Mhm.
are at any time and have an infinitely better experience of being alive, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Um, there, while you were talking about that, I was just thinking about that verse in the Tao Te Ching that says the Tao that can be named is not the Tao at all, and it's
Mm,
just that big of, we don't know what we don't know. Like, we have no idea how much we just don't know, and that can become exciting to some and then scary as shit to others. And I think that's that coffin of identity is where it becomes scary. Like, when you're living in that small self, that small space of, I need to know all of this, I need to know all that I know in order to feel like I'm somebody, versus that space of becoming more aware of your infinite perfection, that you can say, wow, I don't know what I don't know, and that's so much. And it becomes exciting. So when you begin to work with somebody who comes to you and are ready to ask these questions, how do you now begin to help them move towards that more infinite self? How do you begin to break some of this stuff down, as we've been breaking it down? Where do you go from here in helping someone?
yeah, I like to call my stuff transformative conversations, because it's like,
Mm,
you know, I marvel at the creativity of the mind and the human experience. You know, it's kind of like, I'm not in conflict with people. Like, if they believe something to be true, I'm not trying to fight that
yeah,
with people. But
right.
like, basically, we're having conversations. You know, like not you specifically, but you're talking about how you see the world, and I'm talking about how I see the world, and we're having these conversations that are transformative, because you only find out what's true by finding out what's not true. You know, it's
Amen
kind
to
of like
that.
that's the only way to go. It's kind of like, so you start seeing what's not true. You know, it's kind of like, and I guess what I'm pointing to what's right with people. You know, it's kind of like where everyone else in the helping space, not everyone, but a large percentage of people
Yeah.
are pointing to what's wrong with you and how to
Right.
fix it, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
in a way, I go to a professional, I tell them what I'm doing, I give them a list of behaviors, thoughts, and so on, and lengths of time and intensities of experience to a professional, and they confirm that there's something wrong with me. They say, yep, that's what this is. They give it a label or a name or a typical psychological, they put a psychological concept onto it, and
Yep.
they give you some reasons why you've got it, and they tell you that they can help you fix it as long as you
Yeah.
pay them for long
Here's
enough.
the
You know, it's kind
process.
of like,
Yep.
so in a way, like you go away thinking, fuck, oh, thank God for that. You know, I know
Yep.
what's wrong with me now. But you
Yeah.
also feel like you're afflicted with something that you don't actually know. It's just someone's opinion. It's not, there's no truth to it. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so that's like the traditional process. But what I'm helping people to see is what's right with them. You know, it's kind of
Mhm.
like if you're looking at addiction as, you know, a self-correcting mind body system that makes complete sense. You know, I'm often, people will say to me, you're the first person that's ever said like that there's nothing wrong with me. You know, it's kind of like, so I'm helping people to see how their true nature has been guiding them, you know, how they've been, how their all experience is divine. How do we even get into this conversation today? It's kind of like
Yeah.
something is guiding us through life. You're not doing it, you know. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, and we start to look at how that could be true. We start to look at how things are not true. You know, it's kind of like, well, how do you know you've got this disease? Well, somebody told me. Well, like, how do they know? Well,
Right.
don't know. They went to school. They got an education. Okay, so how did they know? It's kind of like we start to go. All I'm asking people to do is consider like what's been impressioned upon them, you know, and kind of like where has that come from? You know, it's like to look at the fact that in the human experience there are no truths. You know, it's kind of
Mhm.
like there are no facts about human minds and psychology. It's all opinion based approach, you know, theoretical. Okay, and you can create scientific data to prove anything you want. You know, me and you can look at the same study
Yeah.
and it can prove two opposites. You know, it's kind
Yeah.
of by the interpretation of data, and including all the fallible subjective humans that were involved in the data collection. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
and the people collecting the data, scientific data, you can make it fit to
Yeah.
whatever you want. So basically what I'm saying is, you know, I help people question what they've created in their own mind as solid, concrete evidence as to what's wrong with them, you know, and things start to fall apart. You know, things start that looked real start to not look so real anymore, you know, and as soon as that happens, you know, then it's like the domino effect, because they start to go, well, yeah, I can see that I'm not my thinking about myself. You know, I'm not this story that I've made up. I'm not, the past can only be relived in memory today, and the
Yes.
future hasn't come along yet. So what else is not true?
Yeah.
Else is not
Yeah.
true about myself? Like, where did this belief that you need to work 9 to 5, and where did that come from? So people
Mhm.
just start to question shit that's been installed into them, and then it all starts falling apart, you know. And it's like
Yeah.
and from there, they're more willing for introspection, you know, like to question everything. And naturally, who am I comes as a byproduct of that. Well, if I'm not who I think I am, I'm not the sum accumulation of all my past experiences and all the wrongdoings that I've done and all the labels that I've been given by well-meaning, and I really mean that, you know,
Yeah.
professionals, you know, those people that tried to help me. If I'm not all those things, then who am I?
And you know, at the same time, it can be so scary in ways to break away from those labels, because it goes to show how how all of that conditioning, how deep that conditioning goes. I remember when I began to ask the greater question of, well, I want to know God. I had run into this very brick wall with religion. I had been told without shadow of a doubt that I did not fit in that space.
Yeah.
And yet I had had some experiences that I could truly know that they're okay, wait, there's something deeper and more to what I'm just seeing. But I don't belong in this space. And I remember asking that question of saying, well, I want to know what it is. I want to know. And at the time, I used the word God. I want to know God. I don't want to hear about God. I don't want to know what someone else believes. I want to know what I believe. And as I did that, there was this process of unlearning that had to take place. And I realized that even the things that I adamantly opposed that I believed in still held belief, because you can't not believe in something without believing in it. And I remember there just being this time in my life where I was just kind of floating around, very feeling unstable, because I didn't have all of those things to stand on, all of those beliefs that were not true in the first place, to give me this false sense of stability. And that
Yeah.
became like a very frightening place to be for a while, until I started getting to that deeper inner truth of, that where those things came from. And I started this process that I often do now still, and I questioned my fears. And the more I questioned those things that I was afraid of, the more I spoke them out loud and asked myself, well, is that true? Is this fear really true? And it became less big, it became less ugly and scary and monstrous, and it became the result of some type of conditioning or belief system that I held from far back. Some places, some of them I can pinpoint, some of them I can't, but I know that they're not the ultimate truth. They
Mm.
can't be. It's like you just stated, the past is only experienceable through the mind and memory, and the future hasn't happened yet. So it's only right now. So does that fear really have any standing in this moment right now? And the answer has to be no. You
Yeah.
know, it's amazing.
I'm glad you said undoing, because it's another word I would use. It's kind of like, again, as a comparison to traditional Western. I guess in my mind I would call mine a combination of Western and Eastern approach. It's kind of like
Mhm.
Western psychological and somatic, and Eastern spiritual practice.
Yeah,
Like um, in mine, we're undoing what's not true to find out what is true. We're
yeah,
undoing
that's
all the
amazing.
things that have been impressioned on the mind to see what's always been there.
Yeah.
So I say to people, I'm not giving you wisdom. I'm not teaching you anything here. I'm just helping you see what's already there. It's like
Mm,
within you, and that's why I call it the difference between teaching a man how to fish and feeding him a fish, because it's
yeah.
like one of them lasts for a lifetime. So when people start to question their own mind, see who they are, and understand the functioning of their own mind and how the human experience is created, they're much more equipped to live life from a perspective of not getting caught up in their thoughts, for one, in their
Yeah.
fears and insecurities about stuff. Like, for example, somebody comes to me. I had a client recently. He said to me, "Oh, I'm really stressed." He said, "This is where it started, the conversation." So, why is that? He said, "I've got so many things to do on my list, And he said, "Oh, what are they? Like, how come you do them?" And he said, "Well, it's work. It's money. I need the money." And I said, "Oh." I said, "Do you always worry about money?" He said, "Yeah, I do actually." And he said, "And how long have you worried about money?" He said, "Actually, my whole life." And I said, "And how many times in your whole life have you not had enough money?"
Hmm.
Never. He just started laughing, because it's kind of like that. I've never not had enough money, and I've worried my whole life about not having enough money. Like, what does that tell you? It's kind of like
Yeah.
pretty much there. It's like saying, spent my whole life worrying about not having enough money, doing things and getting stressed on the basis of not having enough money. And that is taking away my quality of everyday life,
Yes.
right? It's kind of like, on the fear of something that's never ever happened. I've got 100% track record of having enough money every single day of my life for the first 50 years. Yeah. And I've spent the whole of those, like a large amount of those 50 years worrying about not having enough. And I'm still doing shit to try and offset that thing. So then, okay, so it's nothing to do with the money. Then what is it?
Mm,
Then what
mm,
is it? Then we ask that question. It's kind of like, what is actually happening here? Why is it? So it was an installed belief. A kind of
mm.
an idea about like always creating in the world, and you've got to keep having more and more, and there's never enough of more, right?
Yeah,
There's
yes.
never enough of more on the outside to make you okay on the inside.
Mm,
But I
mm.
stay in the rat race, thinking that I keep going, keep going, keep going, and it often for people never get to that point where they've got like 6-7 figures in the bank where they can start to go, hold on a minute, I've got enough money to not work for the rest of my life, and I'm still worried. At that point,
Yeah,
people do question it, but some people have got some money, but they don't have that. They haven't amassed that amount to the point where they question their own insecurity. They just keep in the rat race.
yeah,
So just one
yeah,
example of what I'm saying about undoing commonly held beliefs or installed beliefs. It's kind of like that stop you seeing and resting in your true nature. It's kind of like and keep you in the rat race of the human experience.
It goes back to when I'm in that process. I try to remind myself of nature, and I look out, and my wife feeds these birds all the time, and I look at these birds and I watch them, doing all this, and I think, I none at no time do I believe that those birds wake up every morning and go, oh my God, how am I going to eat today? How am I going to nest today? And is there going to be enough trees? And will there be enough grain? And here they are, just being their bird selves, just going through life trusting, and they're always taken care of, whether it be by my wife or someone else or just nature in general. And that always seems to be the case. When I get caught up in worrying, I know that I'm worrying from my past trauma. I had this conversation earlier today. Where does my fear come from? Well, the fear comes from, at one time not having enough. Well, at that time, all of your money was going towards this escape, through this addiction and this escape. And that's no longer there. But all of the fears and the worry are still left over. The crumbs are still living there, and you're still living from that space. And when you live from lack, that's what you can experience, because if that's your focus, that's your filter. Then that's really all that you can experience, because through the filters, sometimes you miss, the abundance that is truly there. And again, we go back to that thing. Well, if the past is done and over with, and the future hasn't happened, in this moment I am well, I am provided for, I am being sustained. And we fail sometimes to realize, and I think we're beginning to as a collective, but it's taken a long time to just see how much this stress and fear affects our physical health. You and I know this. We both were at one time were very overweight, addicted to food, and we thought, well, if I get skinny, this will fix my life. Like if I get thin and I stop this addiction, my life will be better.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh shit, no, I'm still here carrying all of my fears from even those times,
Yeah.
and it's amazing how we as human beings hang on to this baggage almost as if it's feels safe, like this is my shit, nobody can take my shit away from me. This is mine. And I just wonder why we do that. And it's got to be from, that generations of learned and imprinted behaviors and beliefs, you know?
It, it's the most, I always say, the most difficult thing you'll ever do is meet yourself.
Mhm.
It's kind of like of being true to yourself, knowing yourself as you are, being willing to stand up and speak out what means something to you, and say, this is who I am, because that might mean showing vulnerability. It'll mean
Very
being open
much.
to attack. It'll mean
Yep.
being something that doesn't fit into some mainstream idea somewhere. Everyone's going to have that to some extent. So it's like
Yeah.
it's always the most challenging thing you'll do, because what it means is that you'll stop becoming a follower, of all these mainstream ideas, and you'll start to be on your own path. It's kind of like standing up in the world, being who you are, and like
Yep.
that. There's always a hater for that. There's always
Yes.
somebody against that. There's always someone to criticize that. And it's like that's what people are frightened of. And
That's
it's
it.
like, so it takes a full embodied approach. A fully kind of in it. I'm in it now. It's kind of
Hmm.
like this is it. This is the way I'm going. And often that's not a decision anyone can make. It's only something that comes about naturally by undoing all the ideas that have been impressioned upon us, and then getting to a point where we can no longer live any other way. It's kind of
Yes.
like that we have to step into this truth of who we are, because it's actually more painful not to.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I remember the moment that happened, coming out of active addiction, and let more than the coming out, the active addiction was that opportunity to be introduced to myself, because that was really the deeper decision that I was making in that time is, okay, I can't continue to run from myself and run from the feelings and the acceptance of the past that I've had. I can't continue to do that in this way or any other way. So now I'm going to have to introduce myself to myself. And then at the same time, also, when I came to the place where I knew that it was time that I stepped into my own gender transition,
Mm,
but I almost stayed right there on the surface. I almost did it again, I say, because there was that, it's real easy to slip over into that label of being transgendered, and all of a sudden you have a community and you have a cause and you've got something to stand on and believe in.
mm,
And it was when I was challenged by, one of my great friends. I think you guys would get along magically. His name's Martin John Garcia, and he asked me that deeper question. Yeah, but that's not all you are. I mean, if that's all you are, that's not that interesting. So, you know, and then that was the moment that I got that I had the opportunity within myself to meet myself at an even deeper level. And so often when I work with people who are young and going through gender transition, or older and gender transition, that's the goal. Is find yourself. Don't stop
mm,
at the label. There's going to be many opportunities along the way to
mm,
stop the bus and get off at a label, but you're going to find eventually that doesn't fit either. And where you may find some peace for a little while, it's not true peace, because it's believing in a set of beliefs. When I remember going to my transgender support group and feeling anything but supported, I felt so pressured. I felt so, changing your name and all of these gender markers. And I thought, oh my God, this is too much. Like I don't feel supported. I feel pressured. And it was yet another identity that, I was going to have to try on and make fit. And I thought, so it's often still even confusing in these times when I talk to people who I'm their first transgender experience. They're the only person they know, and they will say, well, a man doesn't act like that. Like, you can't do that. You're going to give yourself away. And I'm thinking, but I'm not here to hide. Like, that's the
mm.
point. I'm
Yeah.
not here to come from one place of hiding the fact that, I am foreign in my own body for all those years, trying my best to fit into the role of a girl. Um, and just to now jump over the fence and do my best to fit into the role of a man. I'm pretty okay with just being me. And however that expresses is how that expresses. And it's okay with me if you can't really put a finger on what it is that you think I am, because I know. And that's all that really counts, is that I know. And so,
You,
gosh, it's a
like,
gift.
yeah. One last thing. Do you ever remember like first going to 12 steps and maybe you even said it yourself, like, but I certainly said it and I heard it a lot was people say, oh, I just felt like I wanted to belong my whole life. And now I feel like I belong here.
Yes,
You know, it's kind
yes,
of like, that's what the fellowship thrives upon. Right. But
yes,
if you think about that from what we were just talking about, right, it's kind of like the perspective that a human being like has a desire, you know, and is it an installed desire to belong to something, to be accepted, you know,
yes.
because we've perhaps never been accepted or felt accepted from, you know, our childhood traumatic experiences, which all of us have to some extent.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like then finding something like you said about your support group where you really want to belong, but you don't. You know, it's kind of like
Yeah.
you just find a way to make it like 12 steps
Yes.
because you've got this addiction thing and you believe you've got a disease. You find a way to belong because it's the first place that you ever got accepted for some shit that you like, no matter how
Yeah.
crazy you were. But actually, just the desire to belong says that I'm not willing to step into my who I am. You know, it's kind of
So
because when I'm willing to step into who I am was when I was willing to leave 12 steps.
yes.
You know, it's kind of like, and just say, you know what, fuck it. I don't need to fit into this set of beliefs. I don't need to call myself an addict or anything to stay clean. It's not true that
Yes.
I'm going to die if I stop going to meetings. You know, it's kind of like, or any of those things. And I'm not
Yep.
saying anything bad about 12 steps. I'm just
No,
saying
yeah.
that process that I went through and the seeing of kind of like that that lie that you're an addict and you've got a disease for life and so on is a better lie than the one you had before.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
like when you were killing yourself and ending up in institutions and prisons and stuff like I was, you know,
Yep.
that's a better lie, but it's still a lie. You know, it's not the truth of who you
Yes.
are. You know, the truth of who you are is that you're an infinitely creative being that has the potential of the entire universe, like any
Yes.
one of us, you know, that's the truth.
Yes. Yes, and it is the truth, and it feels so good. I mean, I completely equated that. You know, when I was when I first started my journey, my healing journey, I went back to medication assisted treatment. Like there was an awareness that okay, if I got to work on my head, and my heart, I just can't tackle all of it. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to let this work for my body and I'm going to work on my head, and my heart, and then I'm going to, you know, however it happens. But I knew that that was part of it. And there was nowhere I could belong. Nobody was accepting of that. I couldn't go to the meetings and them accept that. I couldn't, you know, there was always, and I remember really struggling with that whole question of, well, are you in recovery or aren't you? These people say you're not, and you know, other people say you're trading, but you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like you inherently within you know that this is the right step for you. So fuck it.
Yeah.
Be you. Like be with you. Own your own experience. And that is when I began actually, you know, speaking out in, you know, in different ways about recovery in general, healing more than recovery. It was more about healing, and what the bigger process of all of this was not to just fight off, you know, your triggers and fight off your coping mechanism, but it was to heal the roots of getting to know, introducing, being able to be with yourself and be okay with that, regardless of however that shows up and what that looks like, and who's willing to accept it and who's not. And you know, and you're right, you know, we're born needing to be accepted in some tribe because we can't survive on our own. You know, there is no 1 year old that or newborn that, you know, just comes out and then is out in the world, jumps up on their feet and they're off to it. Like I think that's an inherent need that we all face. And at the same time, the gift to me of the trauma and the addictions and all the failed attempts to check boxes and belong are that I can finally belong to myself. I can understand who I am on an infinite level
Mm.
and make these amazing connections within. And you know, man, I don't feel lonely anymore. Did you ever get to that place where you just didn't feel lonely anymore? That you could sit with yourself and no longer feel lonely?
Yeah, I mean, I quite enjoy my own.
I
We're
do
being
too.
collective, you know. It's kind
I
of like
know. I
I enjoy
love it.
company, but I also enjoy,
Me too.
you know, being on my own too.
And there was a time that I couldn't stand it. There was a time that if I were on my own, I had to escape. And it's an amazing space to be in.
Yeah.
Man, this is another good conversation. I'm telling you, brother.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to just keep doing this. I
Sure.
think you just either need to move to the States or forget about it. It's maybe the UK is a little less wild than it is over here. I don't know. Maybe I should just move that way. We should have conversations like this all the time. I think they're radically helpful, and I'm grateful to have you in my reality. It's been a great experience meeting you,
Yeah.
and getting to
Likewise.
share space with you. Um, Everybody, if you don't remember, let me remind you that Jason has a podcast called Misunderstandings of the Mind. I listen to his podcast on Apple Podcasts. I'm sure it's available on all major podcast platforms, but it is a great
Yeah.
podcast. I thoroughly enjoy it. There's so much there. And if you're interested in getting to know Jason and his services of recovery, you can go to the infiniterecoveryproject.com and hook up with this man. He's an amazing human being and has a lot to offer the world, me, and all who come in contact with him. So man, thanks so much again, Jason. I can't wait till we do this again. I
Thank,
Anytime, I'm here for you, man. It's awesome to know you. It's
thank
awesome
you.
to know you.
Thank you.
Give our love to your girlfriend and how you guys go through this time. I know it's a trying time, but we surround you in love. And I thank you, man, so much.
Thank you.
I
I
really
appreciate
do.
that. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, brother. All right, everyone. Until next time, you know how to find us. Recovery Soul Food Podcast live every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Recovery Revolution Live, Lona Curry on Facebook, and Recovery Soul Food on YouTube. You know where to find us. Go do all the stuff. Remember, I love you. And remember, no matter where you are or where you think you are, you can get up from your give up and you can create a life you love. Until next time. Bye, everybody.